January 15th, 1947. Los Angeles wakes to find a young woman's body, drained of blood and sliced in two, laid out with surgical precision in a city park. The headlines would call her the Black Dahlia. But beyond the grisly crime scene was Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old with Hollywood dreams. What turned a hopeful arrival into the center of Hollywood's most haunting unsolved murder? Her story begins long before police sirens shattered the peace. Elizabeth Short stepped off the train in Los Angeles in July 1946, carrying a suitcase and the weight of her hopes at just 22. She joined thousands of others drawn west by the promise of post-war opportunity, where the city's neon lights and crowded boulevards promised a fresh start. Records show she rented a modest room near Hollywood Boulevard, not far from the Florentine Gardens nightclub. Her name appeared on temporary housing receipts and in the logs of bustling boarding houses, each address a brief stop in a restless journey. The city was swelling with newcomers, many like Elizabeth, searching for a place in the movie capital's orbit. She found work as a waitress, earning tips while scanning the faces of regulars for a hint of Hollywood's magic. The optimism of her arrival lingered in her letters home, filled with stories of sunshine and dreams. For Elizabeth, Los Angeles was more than an escape. It was a chance to become someone new. Elizabeth's handwriting filled pages with stories of longing and small victories. In her letters to friends and family, she described afternoons spent waiting tables near Hollywood's neon-lit clubs, the ache of tired feet, and the thrill of spotting a familiar face among the crowds. She wrote to Major Matt Gordon during the war, sending more than 24 letters in just 11 days, confiding her hopes and disappointments. One note to a former boyfriend admitted, "Yes, I have dated since I've seen you last, and most of them disgusted me." These glimpses reveal a young woman who believed in love, even as she faced rejection and loneliness. Behind the myth spun by headlines, Elizabeth's real life was a patchwork of rented rooms, late-night shifts, and dreams she refused to let go. Her optimism persisted in every line, as if each letter home might carry her closer to the future she imagined under the Hollywood lights. At 10 a.m. on January 15, 1947, a young housewife named Betty Bersinger walked along South Norton Avenue in Los Angeles, pushing her 3-year-old daughter in a stroller. The street was quiet, lined with vacant lots and the occasional bungalow, the winter sun just beginning to warm the sidewalks. As she moved past an empty lot near 39th Street, something pale caught her eye among the weeds. For a moment, she thought it was a store mannequin, discarded and split in two. What she actually saw would haunt her for the rest of her life. Betty later recalled that the body was so white she thought it was a mannequin. The figure lay close to the sidewalk, exposed and oddly arranged. The torso had been severed at the waist, the legs spread apart, arms raised above the head in a grotesque pose. The skin was drained of all color, almost luminous against the brown grass. Betty shielded her daughter's eyes, then hurried to a nearby house to call the police. Within minutes, squad cars arrived. Officers quickly realized this was no accident, no simple act of violence. The woman's body was completely naked, scrubbed clean, and displayed with an almost theatrical precision. Her face bore deep, slashing wounds from ear to ear, carving a permanent, unnatural smile. There were marks around her wrists and ankles, evidence she had been bound. The ground around her showed no blood, only a few footprints and a faint trail leading away from the scene. The first responders cordoned off the lot, but the news spread fast. Before long, neighbors gathered at the edge of the tape, staring in silence as detectives began their grim work. Photographers from the Los Angeles Herald and Examiner rushed in, snapping pictures before the area could be fully secured. Even as police tried to preserve the evidence, the scene grew crowded, with reporters, curious locals, and children peering from behind fences. The city's hunger for sensation was already at work. The officers found no clothing, no purse, no identification. Just a body, posed and mutilated, left in plain view as if meant to be discovered. In the days ahead, the details would only grow more disturbing. But for Betty Bersinger, that morning on Norton Avenue would always be frozen in her memory. The moment Los Angeles changed and the Black Dahlia mystery began. Frederick Newbar, Los Angeles County's chief coroner in 1947, was handed a case unlike any he had seen. On January 16th, he began the autopsy of the woman identified as Elizabeth Short. Every detail was recorded with care, stripped of the lurid language that would soon fill the newspapers. The body, drained of blood and washed, showed no dirt or debris. There were no signs she had been killed at the lot where she was found. Instead, Newbar noted, she had been moved there after death. Her skin scrubbed clean, likely with gasoline, erasing fingerprints and trace evidence. The most immediate finding was the cause of death: cerebral hemorrhage and shock. Blunt force trauma to the right side of her face had fractured the skull, leaving deep bruising and swelling. There were marks on her wrists, ankles, and neck, evidence she had been bound for hours before she died. The cuts to her mouth, extending from ear to ear, had been made while she was still alive. But the signature mutilation, the bisection at the waist, was performed after death. Newbar's report described the surgical dissection in precise terms. The body had been severed cleanly between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, a method known as hemicorporectomy. This technique, rarely taught outside of advanced surgical training, required anatomical knowledge and a steady hand. There was almost no bruising along the incision, confirming it had been done post-mortem. Internal organs had been removed with equal care, and the lower half of the body showed no signs of struggle or resistance. The body's condition raised more questions than it answered. The absence of blood at the scene, the thorough washing, and the precise dissection all pointed to a killer who planned each step. Newbar noted that the cuts were not jagged or hurried. They were deliberate, as if made by someone comfortable with a scalpel. Police investigators began to consider suspects with medical backgrounds, including doctors, surgeons, and even mortuary workers. Other findings filled out the portrait of the victim. Elizabeth Short stood 5'5" and weighed just over 115 pounds, with blue eyes and brown hair. Her teeth were in poor condition, a detail noted by the press but given little importance by the coroner. No evidence of sexual assault was found, and the body bore no defensive wounds. The final report, reprinted years later in crime encyclopedias, offered only the facts, no speculation, no embellishments. For detectives, the clinical nature of the crime set the investigation on a narrow path. Whoever killed Elizabeth Short had not only taken her life, but left behind a riddle that would haunt Los Angeles for decades. Detectives began piecing together Elizabeth Short's final movements with the tools they had in 1947. The last person confirmed to have seen her alive was Robert Red Manley, a traveling salesman from San Diego. On January 9th, Manley dropped Elizabeth at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, where she was seen making phone calls in the lobby. Manley's account never wavered. He submitted to hours of questioning, passed a polygraph, and was released by January 20th. With Manley cleared, investigators faced a dead end. No verified sightings of Elizabeth surfaced after she left the Biltmore. For 5 days, her whereabouts remained a mystery, a gap that would haunt the investigation. The LAPD turned to the only physical lead they had, the body itself. Identification came through fingerprints, matched on January 16th, to records from Elizabeth's previous arrest for underage drinking at a Santa Barbara party. The FBI teletype system delivered the match in under an hour, a technical feat for the time, but the trail was already cold. There were no witnesses, no security cameras, and no reliable logs from the city's crowded hostels or nightclubs. The era's forensic science could offer little more than blood typing and basic fingerprinting. DNA analysis was decades away. Even the partial fingerprints lifted from a manila envelope sent to the Los Angeles Examiner, which contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, photos and address book, were ruined in transit, compromised before the FBI could analyze them. At the crime scene, police worked quickly to cordon off the area, but the effort came too late. Reporters and curious bystanders trampled through the lot, contaminating footprints and any chance of preserving delicate evidence. Officers collected what they could: soil samples, stray hairs, and the faint impressions left in the grass. But the killer had scrubbed the body and belongings with gasoline, erasing prints and washing away nearly every trace. The surgical precision of the bisection hinted at medical training, but Los Angeles in 1947 was home to thousands of doctors, nurses, and mortuary workers. The scope was overwhelming. Leads poured in, but most went nowhere. The city's swelling population and transient nightlife made it nearly impossible to track Elizabeth's final days. LAPD detectives faced mounting pressure from city officials and a press corps hungry for answers. The investigation was already straining under the weight of its own limitations. As headlines spread across the country, the case slipped further from the hands of the police and into the realm of myth. News of Elizabeth Short's murder exploded across Los Angeles by the afternoon of January 15th, 1947. Headlines screamed from every corner, "Werewolf killer strikes again," and "Who is the Black Dahlia?" The city's papers, locked in a fierce rivalry, pushed lurid details to the front page, each story more sensational than the last. Reporters swarmed the police station, hungry for every scrap of information, while editors dispatched photographers and stringers to every address in Short's battered address book. The press took an active hand in shaping the case. The Los Angeles Examiner received a manila envelope on January 24th, 9 days after the body was found. Inside were Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen inscribed on the cover. The items had been cleaned with gasoline, just like the body. The envelope was accompanied by a note whose letters had been cut from newspaper headlines. The note read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." The sender signed it as Black Dahlia Avenger. The nickname Black Dahlia caught on instantly. It played off the 1946 film Noir the Blue Dahlia, and the dark clothing Short was said to favor. By the end of January, the name was everywhere, in bold print, in whispered conversations, in police reports. The case was no longer just a murder investigation. It had become a spectacle, a story that blurred the lines between fact and fiction. The attention brought a flood of confessions. By February, more than 50 people, men and women, young and old, had walked into police stations, called reporters, or mailed letters claiming responsibility. Some confessed in person, others by phone, a few by telegram. One Army veteran, Daniel Voorhees, was the first to claim guilt, but his story unraveled in a matter of hours. Many others followed, each confession more bizarre than the last. Some seekers craved notoriety, others seemed lost, swept up in the city's collective hysteria. The LAPD, already stretched thin, spent precious hours investigating each claim, running down alibis and administering polygraphs, only to find that none could be tied to the crime. The press corps stoked the chaos. Reporters bribed officials for autopsy details, and even called Elizabeth's mother in Boston, pretending her daughter had won a beauty contest just to extract personal information for their stories. The city's hunger for scandal turned Elizabeth from a person into a myth. Police complained that the media's interference tainted witnesses and muddied leads, but the papers kept printing, their presses running late into the night. In the glare of the headlines, the investigation lost its center. Every new confession, every bold headline, widened the gulf between truth and rumor. The Black Dahlia became a symbol of Hollywood's broken promises, of the city's appetite for spectacle, and of a mystery that seemed to grow more tangled with every passing day. Mark Hansen's name surfaced early in the investigation, written in the address book mailed to the Los Angeles Examiner, along with Elizabeth Short's birth certificate and photographs. Hansen, a well-known Hollywood nightclub owner, had allowed Elizabeth to stay at his home more than once. Some believed he was infatuated with her, possibly angered by her rejection. Detectives pressed him about the address book and his connections to the city's underworld, but no physical evidence tied him to the crime. Hansen passed a polygraph and cooperated with police, insisting Elizabeth was only a casual acquaintance. Still, his political influence and ties to the nightclub scene left a shadow over his name, and rumors lingered for years. Leslie Dillon appeared on police radar 2 years after the murder. A bellhop and aspiring writer, Dillon wrote letters to the LAPD, expressing a morbid fascination with the case. He described details of the mutilation in language that mirrored the killer's own taunting notes, even composing poems that echoed the crime's brutality. Police brought him in for questioning, convinced his knowledge went beyond what the newspapers printed. Dillon claimed he was simply obsessed with true crime and insisted his information came from public reports. A grand jury reviewed his statements and his alibi, finding no direct link to Elizabeth Short. Dillon was released and the case moved on, but his name remained in the files as one of many who inserted themselves into the story. Dr. George Hodel, a physician with a mansion just miles from where Short's body was found, became a focus years later. In 1950, the LAPD and the District Attorney's Office wiretapped his home, recording weeks of conversations. On tape, he said, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." The tapes also recorded screams and sounds of violence from his basement, but officers never intervened. Hodel's medical background matched the surgical skill seen in the bisection, and his social connections placed him near the heart of Hollywood's elite. Yet handwriting experts disputed any match between Hodel and the killer's letters, and no physical evidence linked him to the crime. Hodel left the country soon after the surveillance ended, and no charges were ever filed. Each suspect's story is riddled with contradictions and dead ends. Hansen's address book, Dillon's letters, Hodel's wiretapped boasts, all compelling, none conclusive. The evidence against each man is tangled with rumor and speculation, while the evidence clearing them is just as incomplete. Decades later, the Black Dahlia case remains unsolved, its suspects frozen in time, their secrets buried in the shadows of Los Angeles. Decades later, the Black Dahlia files remain incomplete, critical evidence lost, suspects debated, and the truth obscured by time. In an era when cold cases are solved by DNA and digital forensics, Elizabeth Short's murder highlights the limits of justice when evidence vanishes. Some mysteries fade, but this one still asks, how many stories are left unsolved, just out of reach? Share your thoughts below.